Welcome back. If everybody took their seats, we can start our session. Let's give a big welcome to our last speaker of the day. He is a professor of economics at Kadir Has University, Erinç Yeldan.
Hello, folks. Welcome home. This is the home of the resisting brave. I'm an economist, so I will mainly concentrate on the economics of climate change. But as the title says, this is no neoliberal, neoclassical mythologies, but we are going to talk about power. Right? So without losing any time, I will just start by the powerhouse. You don't have to read, but can anyone recall to whom this opening web page belonged to among the powerhouses of fossil fuel producers? Shell. It's easy. Sign up and your fleet can drive carbon neutral simply by using the Shell card. All you have to do is use Shell card. Shell takes care of the rest. The projects in the portfolio, reforestation, cook stoves, you name it. For every liter of gas you put in your tank, Shell is paying in full to the Mother Nature. The background was not green. I just put the emphasis. I'm going to come to this picture once again during the course of my presentation. The background will change. Well, I'm not going to get into detail, but let's go to the heart of the problem. Post-COP21, Paris, everyone is in good spirits. INDCs, I get a kick out of this term. It is intended. It is national. It is determined. Contribution, and everything is there. No pressure. Everyone is national, determined, intended. And at the end of all these things, the International Energy Agency argued back then that it was 2 degrees centigrade, not even 1.5, back in Paris 2015, that to reach the 2 degrees centigrade goal, we had to reduce, these are the carbon dioxide only, not the whole greenhouse gases. We have to reduce to less than 20 gigatons of carbon dioxide emissions by 2040. And these were the pledges. Everyone is determined, intended, national. There was a gap of 18 gigatons. And the IEA, in their report, put everything on what comes to one's mind, including nuclear. I'm not going to create a fuss here whether it is part of renewables, it's not. I'm just simply putting the state of the world as of 2016, when the Paris concluded and we came back. Well, efficiency is part of the recipes. CCS, the carbon capture systems, the goodwill, green transitions, we can do it everywhere around. And then there came the Millennium Goals. The United Nations had warned us, saying that the present dominant model of development is facing multiple crises, such as depletion of natural resources and market failures. UNCTAD, the UN's progressive body of conference trade and development, coming from Hans Singer and Prebisch thesis, they note that the current trends of resource extraction and consumption patterns are simply not sustainable. Most of the current industrialization and governance problems originate from the excessive volatility of speculative financial flows characterizing the current realm of markets. Under the looming climate crisis, the shadowy realm of the age of anxiety, where led by the hyperglobalization episodes of premature financial deregulation, the global economy is excessively fragile, global demand remains weak, investments are sluggish, distribution of incomes and wealth are heavily concentrated. In contrast, we have been snowed under one after another the reports from the global economic powerhouses, the World Bank, the potentially devastating consequences of inaction, the World Economic Forum. Roughly half of the global gross domestic product, or 44 trillion US dollars worth of economic value. Now we are speaking numbers. Now it hits. Moody's, sectors that have high or very high inherent exposure to natural capital, report almost $2 trillion worth of debt. Now the language has become clearer, I guess. The ILO, International Labour Organization, back in 2020, just right before the eruption of the COVID crisis, had warned us just only due to heat stress. Leave everything else, the loss in productivity, the debt overhang, just only at the shop floor, the effects of the heat stress has costed about 35 million job losses, which will accelerate to 80 million job losses in 2030. It had costed roughly about $200 billion worth of gross output. Now it is estimated to cost roughly $2.5 trillion US dollars worth of cost, just only because of warming of the shops. These are not evenly distributed. The high-income countries, due to cooling, other technologies, whatever they have, will have only marginally affected, but this output loss due to the heat stress at the factory floor will likely to hit mostly the low-income and the low to middle-income countries. With the employment losses coming mostly hit to sub-Saharan Africa, the South Asia, and with little or no effect on the today's developed parts of the world. The Oxfam, I am sure you could have seen this very powerful and very dramatic picture where Oxfam had calculated and told us that in order to reach the 1.5 centigrade degree, that's the black dotted line, the global average per person emissions should be at 2.1 2.1 tons per person right now. For the hyper-rich, they are already beyond 70 tons per year. Each bar, the blue, the orange, and the yellow, the green, talks about from 1990 the evolution to all the way to 2030 projections. The world average is close because the half of the planet is well below in terms of per capita emissions, and as had been argued this morning, they are becoming middle income people. About 2.5 billion people will reach middle income status by 2030. That means in addition to the present 2.5 billion people, our planet will be holding of about 5 billion people demanding meat, demanding SUVs, demanding plasma TVs, demanding cellular phones, demanding more energy than ever. All right, We know all of these, nothing new. Let's talk about the solutions as the profession argues. Let's leave the solution to the markets. Folks, this is the land of mythology. This is the Zeus, the Athena, the Byzantine walls. There is a beautiful small museum that is open right after. Please spend at least half an hour there, coming from the Sumerians, from the Neolithical ages. Economists have ideas, okay? So suppose that we have two little firms. One is clean, the other one is dirty, in the sense that in terms of the language, the marginal abatement cost, that is, per unit of carbon dioxide emission that the firm tries to abate, reduce, costs are high. Therefore, there is a steep red line, and there is a shallower blue line narrating this situation. And you are the authority, and we are trying to reduce the aggregate amount of emissions coming from these two different firms. They could be doing the same thing, chemicals, cement, iron and steel, whatever, but with slightly different technologies leading to this deity. Well, what we do, we take these previous graphs, put them into a kind of a together map, and on the horizontal axis, this is the amount we want to reduce pollution. And suppose that, well, half and half, they are both taxpayer, good citizens. We don't differentiate between them. We say that each firm is responsible for reducing half of what we want to aim, going from 57 billion tons to net zero in 2050. And we are just going year by year. So from your left to right, pollution is reduced by firm A. From right to left, that's the amount of pollution to be reduced by firm B. And suppose that we want to reduce by 100 units. Well, when we declare 50 and 50, these are rational guys. These, they have come to this world to produce and make profit. And the firm B will say that, look, my costs are very high, X. You're much better position. Let me pay you a little bit, maximum X, but so that we come and trade each other. What are we doing? Trading? License to kill. James Bond movie. We are trading license to pollute. I mean, that's obvious, right? So they come and trade. The market is optimal. We can disperse. How does this thing work? In EU, the data that I have gathered from the EU Commission, it had started in 2005, I know, but until 2012, it didn't mean anything. There was no price, there was no trading, everyone was happy because everyone was granted free allowances and they were all minding their business. The emissions trading system roughly covers 11,000 firms, plants, and that's roughly about 45% of the total emissions of the EU. But here are the sectors. I cut this story just before the COVID, because COVID was a game changer, as we know, but I'm going to mention the post-COVID. The blue line is with respect to 2011, where the action had started. That is the airlines, the aviation. Aviation emissions had in fact increased by 44% under the ETS system. The red line is industrial firms. Their emissions has in fact increased. The black line, mostly the black line is the total, And the yellow line is mostly the energy sector. The energy sector could have reduced emissions and pulled the average down because there were alternatives, there were ready-made solutions, or there was money. Then COVID crisis had come in. In 2020, transportation and air aviation had nothing to do with the ETS, but now we are back, as the most recent data from 2022 that I could have gathered, we are back in the obvious trends. Total emissions in EU from 1990 to end of 2021, and under ETS, the red bars indicate the emissions that could have been reduced until after about 15 years of operation. The Commission is proud of it. The market is working. The market is working, and there is a carbon price of 8 euros per ton that these two firms are, or many firms, almost 11,000 firms, are vividly trading here. This is what it contrasts to the global averages. In Turkish, we say the turtle speed, kaplumbağa hızı. The Americans typically say snail speed. I mean, at this rate, we will never reach to net zero by 2050 or at no time. Then, of course, you know the whole story. Well, of course, there is carbon leakage. We are doing our best, but those dirty Paphlagonians, Africans, Ukrainians, Turks, Chinese, Indians, it's their problem. Now we are going to tax them. Well, before we go that, the Climate Market Watch has produced a splendid data putting the fossil fuel producers and the most polluters on the scale, and they have calculated that from European Union allowances, from international offsets, like the Shell has been proudly putting on its website, from their oligopolistic, monopolistic power, their power to cost pass-through abilities, there are windfall profits. Not only that there is not much of a reduction in industry, in emissions, but these firms are benefiting, they have benefit from 2018 to 2019, a total of $10 real billion just by selling air. In Turkey, too, we have a domestic ETS system to be in operation. Everyone expects to be a seller. No one is a buyer if there is kind of a failing or a negative verification, we are going to find some French who will bring us good technology and will be efficient. So everyone is a seller in this domestic carbon market as of now. No one expects to be a buyer. And it is such a nice story that industries gain. There is not much of an emissions reduction, and the blame is always the other. Who are the main actors? Well, International Energy Agency has claimed that since the onset of the Industrial Revolution, the four big plants, Chevron, Exxon, BP, Gazprom, they had been responsible for a total of, all those four responsible of 11% of the global emissions by themselves. If you add the other biggest firms, the 25 largest transnationals are responsible of almost 60% with their operations in the globally of the global emissions today. So who are we talking about? Individual countries, nationally determined things are missing the target. The true actors that we had to deal with are, back to the main target once again. Now, of course, at the background, the fossil fuel industry globally has a big lobbying power where, according to estimates of both the IMF and many of the NGOs, this data I have taken from the IMF's report, the 2020 figure is narrower because of the decline in activity due to COVID pandemic. But typically, we are talking about $500 billion worth of subsidies, mainly given to the main fossil fuel producers. In Turkey alone, our calculations suggest about 0.5 to 1% of subsidization is directed to coal producers per annum in Turkey as well, through many programs, market-driven programs given under the energy security transactions. Well, what should we do? The first step is revitalizing the fiscal space and its instruments. Fiscal policy doesn't talk about fiscal expansion, but a reorientation from away from fossil fuel activities to decarbonization, removal of direct and indirect subsidies to fossil economy. A paradigm shift in monetary policy. The neoliberal dogma of inflation targeting, that is, central banks should only be responsible from price stability and announce every other month an interest rate and get away with their responsibilities. That de facto transformed the indigenous central banks of the developing world to merely play the role of an accounting agency of global finance has to be abandoned. Central banks and the banking system should be held responsible from their operations of credit allocation, of financing, and a green central banking system ought to be enacted. Central banks will have to shift towards more active policy stance that is more engaged with elimination of structural bottlenecks rather than market neutrality in their pursuit of price stability and leaving their esoteric communication languages. A viable green industrialization based on the works of UNCTAD and other colleagues. Transition from fossil fuel-based production to sustainable and renewable forms of energy, industry and agricultural activities. Addressing informalization and fragmentation of labor markets and installation of decent job programs. Addressing wide imbalances of incomes and opportunities across not only wage labor and capital, but also over gender, ethnicity, and all forms of social exclusion. Granting a realistic role to the states in resource mobilization and resource allocation within principles of social evaluation rather than myopic expectations of the oligopolistic markets. My final take, what we had learned from 200 years of development transformations is to invigorate a mechanism of crowding in of private initiative to be directed under democratic planning that supports structural transformation and the generation of green employments. Folks, this is my take as an economist. Welcome home. We are all around, and I am hoping that you will have a terrific 3 days including today. And I am here for questions, remarks, your contributions. I don't know how the management goes here.
Thank you, Mr. Yeldan, for your inspiring presentation. We have around 8 minutes to have some questions. And Tansu will pass out the microphone for the questions.
I'm wondering if you could show the last slide again and just unpack it just a little bit, since we have a little time.
Oh,
could you share just a little bit about, expand on that just a little bit?
This one?
Yep. No, after that. There. Yes, that one. Could you expand on it?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought... We have been gone through central planning. We are experiencing regional planning in China and Cuba and other countries of the world. It's obvious that the underlying framework is, first of all, democratic planning and crowding in, rather than dictating industrialization targets. And this needs a structural transformation given the localities, the local people's aspirations and their targets, rather than energy, to give energy security for the whole nation. What does it mean? Does it mean displacing people to open up mines and then killing people in the mines for the sake of nationwide security? That's more or less, that's what I'm trying to summarize upon.
Thanks a lot for this presentation. 2 comments, but prior to that one, I think about the emission in Europe. It was not integrated, the imported one, and the small decrease will be even less spectacular. First point, I think there is a question.
Can you put the remark again?
Now that I think it doesn't take into account the imported emissions.
No, definitely not.
Definitely. So with the imported emissions, there is even no small decrease. So it's even more. It's even worse. Yeah. Yes. First question. Yeah, it's about the role of the shareholders, because now they are the one who decides the policy of large corporation, unfortunately. And the shareholders are expecting blindly 15–20% of profit every year, and they don't know where his money is going to, and so on. So how to tell them that the party is over, and the level of profit they do every year, it's belonging to the past. And the second point is about implementing type of debt audit, because private debt is crazy. And if you make a type of debt audit of all the large corporation, and in particular, if you start to make type of not only economic debt, but social environmental debt, most of the corporation are bankrupt. So I will propose to implement type of citizen debt audits implemented everywhere, and also to tell them the party is over, and we should redistribute the card smartly to move to another type of economic system.
No, that's... can't agree more. And there is the phantom FDI. That it sounds like FDI, but there is none. As I have tried to display on the Shell example, the offsets are being just closely studied right now, and one after another there is another report, either by the Climate Market Watch organization or other NGOs, or the Greenpeace by itself, or Oxfam directly, that what had been claimed as offsets, almost 70 to even 80% of it are just phantom. It's just there is no reduction had taken place, but the money has changed hands. That we are sure about it. Thank you.
Is it cutting through? And B, are there lessons you're learning on trying to get these ideas into the political discourse?
Well, I am afraid Turkey is not unique in any point of view. It's a general problem. Environmental policy or climate policy is excessively fragmented, excessively confusing. There is a Ministry of Environment, Urbanization, and Climate Change. Now, even that name tells you where the problem is. I mean, putting climate and urbanization. There used to be a state planning organization which had been turned into a Ministry of Development and then had been taken over. And it turned into a President's Strategy Budget Office. What is very interesting is the most decisive and aggressive climate change policy is pursued by the Ministry of Trade. Because the CBAM is on the agenda and their mandate is to protect the Turkish exports, and there is a train or there is a tornado is coming in. Therefore, the main problem, the first major problem, is extremely fragmented. The ministries are divided among themselves. Almost all private, the TÜSİAD, the Türkkonfet, the chambers of Istanbul, Izmir, Ankara, industrialists, they all have departments of climate change. It's fashion. But the whole idea of reducing emissions did not come to Turkey yet, and our official NDC is proposing a reduction out of a business as usual scenario of an increasing or decreasing out of an increasing path. There is no peak point put on the table yet. And the Turkish energy policy is finish up coal first, and around 2028 to 2030, the 2 nuclear plants will be brought in by the Russian technology. And then roughly around 2038 to 2040, we will peak. And then we are going to talk about net zeroing. And I shouldn't make a big deal out of it, but the target year is 2053, the 600th anniversary of Istanbul. So there isn't much of a clear plan. There are numerous studies. There is a new project that's being initiated that will highlight the domestic ETS system. But the ETS targets are completely out of date. I am sorry, but I have to report all this.
I wanted to go back to the Shell website, and you and many of us who are involved in like ecology and the environmental aspect of economics, of course, can look at this and call bull. But to the average everyday citizen, when they are faced with information like this, they take it at face value. They believe it to be, true, and that there are great monumental strides being made towards the against the climate crisis, and we have the resources to look at this and to take it at not face value. But how would you recommend to either students who are not super involved in this, or to those who are not as adept in the understanding of energy and how it plays a part in our world? How would you recommend the literacy, I suppose?
Well, tough question. It's a lot of greenwashing here. drive carbon neutral. We are passing the Avrasya Tunnel. In the Avrasya Tunnel, I don't know whether the Turkish folks who are driving back and forth, you notice the Avrasya Tunnel, the Eurasian Tunnel, is carbon neutral. It says, so for every, what is it now, 80 liras or something you pay, you are passing through a carbon neutral infrastructure. It feels good, right? You are tired from work, you are going back home, it's nice feelings. But it's all greenwashing. And not only illicit propaganda, but it earns these people money. Just money that's being part of consumers' costs and also tax breaks. It's not only some fancy websiting. It's not only false dreams, but it's also earning money. And that's what I think the whole new green industry, green transition has turned into. I don't want to, really throwing the whole concept to the trash garbage bin, but we have to be aware that what is really green transition and what is greenwashing should be really on our agenda. What do we do? Well, as my colleague sharing the same name, we have been from a generation just burn, trash a couple of windows, burn a couple of tires in the streets. Resist. That's we have to stop buying and selling these products and make as much fuss as possible.
May I? I have a good news for you. There is a pledge, international pledge, called cleancreatives.org. And they are promoting, they are announcing all the greenwashers. And this pledge is for the communication companies, advertising companies, or consultancy companies that you are signing and you are refusing to work for fossil fuels. And there is also, they have an award. And Shell was the award winner of greenwashing of this year. And Edelman was the advertising company, PR company. And Ogilvy also, they were the winners. So they were announced. So if you follow their webpage and if you share it with your friends, then you can learn more about greenwashing and who is doing what. So this is the good news. And now they have 1,000 members, and I hope it will grow. So maybe another good news for Turkey is the green tax, which will come in 2026. Now the regulation is on, right. And the companies and the export from Turkey to EU countries, I think is 64% of the total exportation.
Close to that, about
half, something that around that. So they are not going to be able to export to EU. So they are going to be obliged to do some changes in their process of production line. So maybe we can have a kind of hope. But the government is supporting the coal energy. So I don't know what will come in this conflict of interest.
It will be complicated.
Yeah.
But before you leave the thing, one of the important data, for example, we just observed, according to the OECD statistics, according to OECD definition, not mine or not else, the environmental taxes. The share of environmental taxes in Turkey is among the highest in the OECD, about 4.5 to 5% of the GDP. But it's obvious, there's a tax on gas. These are all indirect taxes that the government is collecting and using them for, so they are not earmarked to any environmental deed. That's the problem. There is the money, and there is the will for all sorts of calamities that you can imagine. So when we talk about pricing carbon, the first reaction is we are paying all those taxes, and now you are trying to add more taxes. No, even with the given taxes, those could be earmarked for a green transition at this level. So this is another hope. Okay, folks, thank you so much for your attention. Uygar, many thanks for your invitation.
We're out of time, unfortunately. We're out of time. Maybe you could answer that after the...
I apologize. I thought the hands were down. I
Özür
apologize.
dilerim hani Türkçe konuşuyorum ama hani hazırladım ama geç geldiği için
Olur,
translate
tabii, hiç
falan
sorun
Türkçe
değil.
konuşacağım.
Tamam, olur
Tamam.
tabii.
Şimdi fosil yakıtlarla ilgili şimdi fosil yakıtın işte Ege'de, Akdeniz'de, Karadeniz'de fosil yakıt sürekli çıkarılıyor. Ya da işte Ege'de, Akdeniz'de çıkarıldı, Karadeniz'de çıkarıldığı iddia ediliyor Türkiye açısından da onu bilemiyoruz. Onların fosil yakıtların çıkarılması en azından azaltılması hem Orta Doğu hani işte Ege, Akdeniz bizim kendi bölgemizdeki ilişkiler açısından hani devlet ilişkileri açısından işte Ege'deki işte mavi vatan işte sınır şeyleri işte ya da Amerika'nın Yunanistan'a işte işte askeri malzeme yığması falan gibi bir sürü sorun yaşıyoruz. İklim içinde iklimin daha emisyonun düşmesi ve iklim içinde ikisi içinde de aslında hani ekolojistler olarak hani biz oradaki hani bu biraz belki ütopya olabilir ama hani olmayacak bir şey de olmayacağını düşünüyoruz. Hani bütün halkların bununla ilgili bir şey yaptığı zaman aslında hani petrol tabii ki ihtiyaç ama hani bir sınırlandırma ya da hani COP27'de ya da bir sonraki Birleşmiş Milletler Birleşmiş İklim toplantısında bununla ilgili bir çalışma yapılsa acaba hem emisyon düşürülmesi hem de hani bütün hem barış hem de hepsini kapsayacağını düşünür müsünüz? Hani bu ne kadar gerçekçi?
Fosil yakıtların
azaltılması,
sınırlandırılması,
yani
yer altında tutulması için bir araya
çıkarılmasının azaltılması, bir sınırlandırma, bir şey konulması hem de hani karbon gazının aslında hani bizim bitiriyorum, topluyorum. Hem aslında hep karbon izinden insanları ve vatandaşı işte halkları şikayet ediliyor sürekli ama devletler, sermaye, sanayinin karbon izi, işte termik santrallerin falan gibi hani uzun konu ama bununla ilgili ne düşünüyorsunuz?
Çok teşekkür ederim. For our guests, the question is about the very first observation is about the negative impact of the fossil fuels, coal in particular, and quite much of support is being granted. And what is our opinion on a global unity and a global decision globally to reduce fossil fuel usage in our homes, in our factories, in our buildings, in our everywhere, just rather than waiting for the market, right, to do it. That's obvious the message that I want to convey, that the markets work very slowly at excessive cost, and we are wasting time. The markets do work very slowly because the market's idea of cost is private cost. You tax, you add, you give subsidies, the market price. But our view of the cost is social cost. And how do we tell the markets that they have to work with social costs is another matter. But we are losing time. We have to do it. There is no doubt about it. Oh, that's true. It's true.
Thank you for that great presentation. I learned a lot. I think our guests learned a lot too. Having listened to such enlightening speeches from such valuable people, we are so close to the end of the day. Coming up next is Dr. Esme to deliver his closing remarks for the day.
Hello, everyone. It's wonderful. We are at the end of day one. We have 1.5 more days to go together, so I'm super excited about that. The university administrators had warned us that because of the setup, that all the participants would actually end up here and this place would be empty, which is exactly the situation right now here. So next time, if you want to come, you can also come from the other door tomorrow. And that door also opens up here. It's the same thing, so just to let you know. Well, we had an amazing line of talks and panels today. So I would like to invite all the panelists and all the people who talked here on the stage, please. Please join us here on the stage. If you had a talk or were on the panel, please join us here so that we can have all the panelists and speakers here. So that, yeah, we have here 2 people who have the same name, right? And not a very common name, I would say, Erinç, right? So we have 2 people with the same name. Come sit in. Yes, Amanda didn't talk today. Yes, she's going to talk tomorrow. And Leda, where are you? You're there. Yes, she's going to talk tomorrow as well. And Ece is going to talk, and there she is also. So thank you so much for joining the day. I would like to have a big applause for them. We had some great conversations, good questions, and good remarks. So thank you all very much. And tomorrow we will continue with further great talks. And I would like to leave the word to Ayşe Defne for a few remarks as well.
Thank you. Thank you all. I hope you had an inspiring day. I certainly did. We will see you here tomorrow at 9:30 for simultaneity, and talks and panels will start at 10 a.m. With Lyda Rinchout in main hall and the panel on People and Planet First Verification in Cinema Room A. See you all tomorrow. Thank you.